Hey, it is time for another episode of Tiki Technical Tuesday. There is a thunderstorm going on right now, which is amazing. And we're going to channel that exciting energy into sculpting a new mug. That's right, it is sculpting week. Believe it or not, I try to follow a little pattern when I do mugs here in the studio, and I go from spooky to cute to spooky to cute. It kind of mixes things up. So we went from a very spooky mug, the zombie jug, to a cute mug, which was the starfish, the happy starfish. From that, we went back to spooky. I think I'm getting the order right on this. And we went into the cassowary skull mug. And so now it is time to return to the land of cute. Why do I do this? Well, it just keeps me on my toes. I like to have the different feelings. I like to explore the different sculptural styles. And I like making cute mugs. So we are going to do a cute mug, and it's going to tie into other undersea critters because I also love creatures of the ocean. What other undersea critters have we done? I'm so glad you asked. We have some remnants and glaze rejects of our other undersea cuties here in the studio. Let's see, we have got the little Ammy, the baby ammonite. Of course, I mentioned the starfish, and we have the little Ika Ika mug, which I absolutely adore, our tiny little squid. So I do have, oh, and hey, the octopus. So we've got a bunch of little undersea critters, and I want to add a friend to that set in a similar scale, in a similar vibe, if you will, and I'm pretty excited about it. So I originally planned on sculpting this new mug in the soft version of Monster Clay. I ordered the soft by accident last year, and it's just kind of been hanging out here. Now this new mug is going to be a very fluid mug, so I thought maybe the soft would work great. Now of course, I ordered this soft in the winter, and I didn't take into account how it would behave in the summer. And let me tell you, it is remarkably soft. I mean, it's like a piece of bubble gum on a hot summer day, and I think it just might be too soft. But I'm still going to use it because we're going to do some maquettes. What is a maquette? I am so glad you asked. It is a super... That was the thunder. The thunder, I love it. So what is a maquette? Sorry, back on track. A maquette, it's a borrowed French word, and it is a super cool, artsy word to use that just means a sketch, but in 3 dimensions. It is a small model, a loose study, if you will, that lets an artist figure out the forms before they move to the larger final sculpture. I love doing them for really odd shapes that are difficult for me to draw out and figure out in 2 dimensions on paper. Sometimes it's just easier to figure things out in 3 dimensions. Case in point, the suffering banana. This was a really tricky thing for me to figure out on paper, so I ended up doing a bunch of small models in clay to figure out how these shapes would work and what the best way to do these shapes would be to allow me to be able to mold it and pull like a plaster mold off of such a complex, weird, organic shape. We are going to do another complex, weird, organic shape today in the form of a moray eel. Now, I know you're thinking a moray eel is scary. What a scary thing. In fact, here is a little toy that I bought way back in 2019 when I first wanted to make this mug. And at that time, I was going to do a scary one. But like I said, I want to do a cute mug today. So we're not going to do a big adult scary moray eel. We're going to do a cute little juvenile baby moray eel. And I think it's going to be awesome. But first, we need to make some models. If you've watched this in the past, you know that when I sculpt a mug, I usually have a pretty exact plan on paper that I'm working from. I use this plan to scale up the mug, to figure out how big it's going to be, to design my armatures, all of those things. I like to get things really figured out on paper, as a rule. But this mug is going to be different. What have I got for this mug? Well, I've got the little kind of rubber model that I bought years ago. I have some printouts of anatomy of actual adult and juvenile moray eels, which I'm going to follow loosely. This is going to be a stylized, cute mug. And then I have my rough sketches. Now I've done a bunch of rough, very loose sketches, both of the original concept for this mug, which is going to be a big shared bowl, like an actual full-size, large moray eel, which I still might do someday, but then also my ideas of making a cute, smaller, single-serving version of it, of a juvenile eel. So I'm going to look at these, I'm going to get some of this clay, and we're just going to dive in and make a bunch of little models. And hopefully we find one we like. Okay, so I'm working my way through various stages. We started really small and I'm getting a little bigger, and the problems are here. Like, I've got to think about this shape. I want it to be interesting from multiple angles. It's still got to hold fluid. It's got to be a mug, and I got to find a shape that'll work. This is close to my initial sketch, and I'm just kind of scaling it up and just making sure there's not other ways that I can make this eel seem exceptionally eel-esque. So I'm going to keep playing. I'm going to keep playing with maquettes. I'll just do a bunch of more models, and then hopefully I'll find something I like. I mean, you're seeing this idea come to fruition. Usually when I do these videos, I come in with a really solid sketch, a really solid concept. So you are seeing concept development in all of its wonders and horrors. Yeah, I want this to be super dynamic. I want it to be dynamic, but I don't want the mold to be insane. I've got to consider the big ones, time and money. I could make this an extremely elaborate organic shape, but then I know it's going to be a very complex mold to make, which means more molding time, casting time, and then a more expensive mug in the end. And I want this to be a relatively simple mug, not simple overall, but just I want to see if I can get the form designed in a way that will keep the costs down for the collector and also to keep my labor down. I've got to keep time in mind. It's important. It's an important factor of the design process. And I do think it can yield some really interesting results when you have those constraints and things to follow when you're thinking of how you want to put the piece together. Oh, this could be cool. Like he's peeking around the corner. That's kind of neat. Yeah, my idea is you've got this cool eel coiled up, and then the hole would either be here, or I could do a hole in the side. Man, so many questions. All right, I'm just gonna keep working on this, and then we'll cut back to when I hopefully have a better idea. All right, it's after lunch, and I have got a maquette that I like. Here it is, a tiny little juvenile moray eel curled up. I really like this form. We worked through starting from like a very simple form to maybe a more complicated squiggle to this final squiggle. And why do I love this? Because I think it will fit in the hand really nice when we bring it up to the proper size. I want it to look like a little eel that's curled up in the palm of your hand that you are sipping a fine tropical beverage from. Now, how big do I want to make the final sculpture? I want it to be cute. I want it to fit in the hand nicely, and it just so happens that I have a mug of the size that I like, and that would be the Coco Skull that we did years back, so long ago that we didn't even put a date on the bottom of it, but this, I believe, was like 2017, I think, circa. I really like the size of this, and I also know that round, like global forms like this hold a lot of fluid, so the mug does not have to be that big to hold that much. Now, of course, this is the final mug. It has shrunk, so I want to look at how big the actual sculpture was, and it just so happens that I have a graveyard of old mug sculptures where the original Coco Skull mug still resides. Here we go. There it is. The original Coco Skull mug, you can see it is slightly larger. In fact, it's about 12.5% larger than the finished piece here. And you can see that I made the armature itself out of PVC pipe and PVC fittings. I find that these work really well when you're sculpting round forms like this. PVC pipe is great. You can drill into it, you can glue it, you can cut it. It's good stuff. Now, I scoured the studio, and of course I don't have the size that I would want to use to make the armature for the little cute eel. So we are going to dash to the hardware store and get some PVC parts. All right, we've got some PVC parts, and I've cut a bunch of circles out of plywood that I'm gluing into those PVC parts. And this is going to let me screw the armature down to like a sculpture stand or a board. It'll just make it easier to secure it through the sculpting and mold making process. All right, it is the end of the day, and we have got our armature completed, and it's ready for clay. Now, I've got to decide if I want to do this out of a medium monster clay or a firm monster clay, but I'm going to just think about it. I'm going to spend the night to think about it, give it some time before we turn our little maquette into a larger mug-sized sculpture. Now, you might be thinking this maquette looks extremely rough because it is. It is a very rough sketch. This is like a napkin doodle of what we want to do for the larger piece. Now, I have seen artists, and if you've possibly watched for me, I always go back to those old The Making of Star Wars specials where they show all the little maquettes and models that they would build of all the aliens. Now, those can range in detail from like a quick little blob like this. Like if you look at the original Jabba the Hutt maquettes, they're really rough. But then you'll also sometimes see for studios, they will do extremely detailed, accurate, small sculptures of makeups and things that you want to do. And those are mainly to sell the director or the art department on an idea. This is just to figure out forms, but I think it's going to be a really cute little mug, and I cannot wait to hold one in my hand. Yeah. All right, so there you go. That's day one. Maquette, armature, clay selection. Can't wait for tomorrow when we start sculpting. Okay, I've been putting it off, but I've got to make this decision. What will we use for the master model? I have got Monster Clay Hard and I've got Monster Clay Medium. Now, Monster Clay is wax-based, as I'm sure I've said before in this video, so it can be very temperature dependent. A consistency that is great in fall when it's very cool in your studio will behave completely different in the summer when it's very warm. Now, I do have AC here in the studio, but it is warm out there. The studio is currently 74 degrees and it is in the 90s outside. So I have got the medium. Now this medium also, so let's stick to temperature. So here's the firm. It's pretty firm, but it's not like a rock. When I last sculpted something out of this, which was the cassowary, it was a much cooler season and this was a much firmer clay. Now I can actually kind of move it without it being under a heat lamp. It's actually somewhat malleable, but still very firm, and I can touch it without imprinting a fingerprint unless I push hard. Then I can put a fingerprint in it. Otherwise, I can handle it safely without messing it up. This is the medium. The medium right now is very soft. You can see I did the maquette for the starfish mug back when I thought I was going to put a face on the starfish mug, which we ended up not doing. But this, as you can see, is soft. It is a soft clay. Even though it says it's medium, in the summer it is soft. This is also the first batch of gray clay that Monster Clay sold, and I think back then their gray formulation overall was much softer than it is now. I'm tempted to get another batch of the medium clay because I think it will be somewhat better. This clay, you can even see it separated a little bit. There's a little bit of, I don't know what material they mix into their clay to make it clay-esque, but it just wasn't the best batch. As a rule, Monster Clay is really great. I use it for almost everything, but sometimes, this is a big shift. They shifted from a red to a gray clay body. I like the gray much better. It's better on the eyes, but this medium is so-so. So I think that we're gonna go with the hard. So we're gonna do the hard. The next question is, do I have enough? I sure hope I do because we need to cover this whole thing with clay. I suspect that there is enough here. We do have an emergency backup in the form of the cassowary master model. If I need to cannibalize clay from that, I will. Hopefully I don't have to. And I think we have enough here. So I'm going to set up heat lamp and we're going to start sculpting. All right, we're ready to dive in. I have got the clay just off camera here under the heat lamp. It is soft. I have got my armature on this. Whoa, we're not ready. I need my little spinny. It was in the glaze booth. Okay. So I have got my spinny. I have got my adjustable laboratory stand, which is incredible for sculpting with. It lets you bring your piece up and down to the height that you desire. I'll put a link to that in the notes for this video. And I have got my armature over here. I've lifted it up to a nice eye height, like eye level, eye sight. I'm trying to match it up with the piece that I'm doing here so I can, work at them together. Anyway, it is time to dive into that. We'll kick it off with a time lapse and of course some music, which you won't be able to hear because, licensing, but I will be listening to some Beastie Boys. Hey Siri, play some Beastie Boys. So this initial blocking out portion of the sculpting is very fun. It is very fast, and I really enjoy doing it. You're just going to want to just impart the general flow and look of the piece. You can see that I have sketched on the base of the armature my planned shape for the eel, just because I'm sculpting on a round armature and it's kind of easy to lose track of where I am on the sculpture. So that's kind of like a little road map that I sketched onto the bottom of the sculpture base there. I'm looking for just the general flow. Like I said, I'm not worried about details even remotely at this point. It is just the overall look of the piece, the overall silhouette of the piece. That is what's important right now. And of course, it wouldn't be a sculpture if I didn't start to immediately regret putting the armature where I put it. I'm going to get to a point really soon here where I'm going to start bumping into the armature, and I think I'm going to have to cut a little bit of it away. But you can definitely see the eel. The eel is coming out. You can see the face, you can see the tail, and I am really liking the shape. All right, I'm just gonna have to stop things right here. Well, I'll let the video play in the background, but long story short, I spend an entire day sculpting this thing and it is getting awfully large. In fact, it's getting way, way, way too big to the point where we're not even gonna probably use this sculpture. Spoilers. And I just don't want to spend too much of this Tiki Technical Tuesday on a sculpture that we're not going to use. So let's just jump to the next day where we have a little meeting with Denise and we decide whether or not the sculpture is in fact too big. All right, it is the next day, and look who it is. It's Denise, the other half of Van Tiki. Why is she in this video? Well, she's here because she needs to tell me whether or not I'm crazy about wanting to completely resculpt the mug at a smaller scale. So she hasn't seen it yet. She's going to take a look. Let's see what she thinks. Coming in, we're going to get her initial reaction.
Ready?
Yep.
That's pretty big.
It's pretty big, right? It's too big. It got too big. It's too big. I mean, it's awesome, but it's big.
It's gonna shrink.
It's going to shrink. Here's the coconut as comparison. And you could look at the coconut upside down. It's kind of a comparison.
Well, actually,
It's kind of, it's not, it's right on the cusp.
I mean, the vessel part of it really is not as much as you think.
Yeah.
The vessel part is only that.
Yep.
And that's the size of the coconut.
Yep.
I say it's fine.
Okay. All right. Well. All right. I'll mull it over a little more. Okay. We're back. We've been talking, and we're going to resculpt, but we're not going to destroy this. This is going to stay here, but I'm just going to try to revisit the form in a slightly smaller scale. And then we'll make a decision from there. I'll have 2 blocked out and we will decide. I think that's the best outcome, right? Okay. All right, we are back to square one and we're using a different clay. Well, this is still monster clay, but I'm all out of the gray, so we're switching to the brown monster clay hard. Is this brown? Maybe they call it red. I don't know. It's like a terracotta color. Anyways, I cut it up into a bunch of little cubes so that it will melt nicely under the heat lamp and we get to sculpting. Now, I bet you're wondering, did I make an entirely new armature for this entirely smaller sculpture? You bet I did, and I made it easily adjustable because I didn't want to have to cut any of it away. So it all clicks together nicely, and I can take the top off if the top gets in the way. Spoiler, I end up taking this top off because, yes, it did get in the way. Okay, we are ready for round 2. I have got my Monster clay, soft, it's softened up under the heat lamp. I've got backup monster clay. I have got my original maquette. I have got the large, possibly too large sculpture. And then I even have the kind of my target scale size original Cocoa Skull sculpture here for me to look at. Let's dive in. Hopefully I get it right this time. I mean, not that this is wrong, but I'm excited to see what happens. Alrighty, now we are cooking with gas. And by gas, I mean, I'm getting pretty familiar with this form. We spent a lot of time on the maquette, and then I spent a lot of time on the sculpture that we decided was too large. So I'm really familiar with the forms that I want to get to. I know where I'm going. I've got a direction, and now I even have a scale, and that scale being smaller than the one that we did before. And I've even got a new idea. I remembered I had some of this aluminum armature wire, and I decided this might help me plot out the curvature of the eel a little better. And bonus, it's very soft and easy to bend and or cut if and when it gets in the way. And of course, like all armatures, it eventually does get in the way, and I do end up cutting a little bit out, but it was a huge help in laying out the flow of the eel. And I'm really glad I remembered that I had this stuff languishing in a drawer. Once I had the general flow of the eel's body laid out with the armature wire, I just filled in the space with clay, packing it in there, and then as the clay cooled off from being away from the heat lamp, it would firm up and it would really hold that shape. That little duck-billed part is going to be the head there. You can see I'm filling in the head. I made the wire loop really tight over there because I definitely didn't want to run into it as I packed in the clay and detailed out the head. And then you can see the tail wraps around on the other side. This is the part of the armature wire that I eventually had to cut away. It just got in the way. But you can see how easy it is to kind of reposition things, replot out things. It was just a really great way to go. I am so glad I remembered this armature wire. Okay, you probably were getting a little sick of time-lapse, so I just took a little pause on filming, and I've just been working on forms. I'm pretty happy with where this is going. It is definitely smaller than our first attempt, but not by much. You can see it's still very similar, but it's just also a little different. I wanted to pick up the tail off of the ground. Is it a tail? Is it the end? I don't know, just like it is on the maquette here. I put it down kind of against the sea floor, if you will, on this one, and I wasn't too thrilled with that, although I love the way that this looks right there. So I think I want to punch this a little more. Now, I don't know, right now I'm debating, do I stretch this out just a bit more? It's a lot of these little kind of noodly questions, but it's tightening up. I definitely went through that stage where I'm like, this is awful, but I got over it and I pushed through it, and now I'm actually extremely excited about it. I love the motion that it has. It's looking very eel-like. Anyway, I will stop yapping, and I think I'm gonna play with this tail just a little bit. I feel bad doing everything in time lapse all the time on these videos, so I'll just let the camera go in real time. Maybe I'll edit it a bit, but it's definitely good to show things happening in real time on occasion, because I don't want to give you the wrong impression on how long it takes to sculpt things. Sculpting takes a while, at least it does for me. All right, I've removed the tail. Got the little tail bit here. And I just want to, so here's where it was, and I'm just deciding, do I want to just stretch it out just a little bit? I think that might be good. Gives it a little more interest, visual interest from here. Yeah, I can even come up higher that way too. Yeah, I think we're going to do that. Will this make molding more challenging? Maybe, but sometimes you just got to do that for the cool shape, right? For the cool form. Yeah, I think this is going to be nice. All right, let's fill this in. So, sculptors that I admire, I first saw, well, you know, I studied a lot of sculpture in college, but at the time in college, I went to school in Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois, a tiny little college in the middle of nowhere, but I knew I wanted to work in special effects, and there was no such thing as a special effects degree at the time, so that's what I ended up doing. I went out there and I majored in communications, but I pretty much had like a double minor in, well, literature, and then also in sculpting. I took a million sculpting classes up there from Eric Maquettes, who was an incredible sculptor and a great teacher, but at the time, like realism in sculpture was really discouraged. Everything had to be abstract, and that tortured me because I think abstract sculpture is beautiful, but it's certainly not something that translates to the film industry, and you don't see a lot of abstract sculpture in film, unless maybe you're watching a Tim Burton film. Ha ha ha. So it was a little difficult. I wanted to do realism. I wanted to work on portraits, but no one was doing it there, and it was really kind of frustrating for me because that's something I really wanted to learn. Okay, so then we get to LA and I get a job. I get my dream job at K&B Effects Group, and that is where I saw some unbelievable sculptors, people who have honed their skill and who are still sculpting today. Right off the bat, I should mention, talking about speed, like watching me sculpt in real time. These guys could sculpt fast because they have to. It's a business. I mean, this is a business too. What I'm doing is a business. It's easy to discourage people thinking of art as a business, but it's always a business. I always think of like Michelangelo, like was he like worried about clients not paying him? I'm sure he was. I'm sure he wished he had more time on projects, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, what I'm getting to, sculptors and amazing people to watch work. So Norman Cabrera, I believe it's Norman Cabrera Monsters or Norman Cabrera, I don't know, I'll put his Instagram thing here, I'll look it up so I can get it right. Absolutely, unbelievably good sculptor, an incredibly nice guy, just an incredible talent. I love watching him work, but he talks about how you go through those stages of sculpting where the blocking out a piece, like what we're doing right now, can go extremely fast, and it's a really fluid time to push things around, and it just goes quick. The forms build up really fast. But then when you shift into doing the detail finish pass, it's like time stands still. All of a sudden it gets really slow, really finicky, and it can get a little frustrating because you were going so quickly before, and then all of a sudden it's like, brrr. But it just takes time to do details, especially as this is the firm clay, and we're going to get it nice and cool after this when we get into the detail phase, so it's just not going to move around as nicely. Man, I'm really rambling. Pardon the rambling. I just feel weird sculpting in silence. Try. I can't sculpt quietly. It is so hard to let this go in real time. I hope that you are not dying of boredom right now. Ah! I think I like extending this tail because I'm trying to break out of the barrel shape that we had from that our original armature in here. I want it to have its own unique form, and we'll get that by having this tail, this organic tail of the eel swooping out like this. I'm adding clay though, that means it's getting bigger. All right, that's enough with the real-time stuff. We're going back to time-lapse. All right, it is Thursday. We are back onto the Moray mug. Moray mug? I don't know. It's funny, Denise just looked at it and said, maybe this one is too small. I don't think so. I think this is going to be just right. But I do need to really focus on it. So I think what I'm going to do is just check back in every hour or so today, and you can see the progress develop. I immediately hopped on the head shape of the Moray. Moray eels have a very unique kind of prominent head shape, and they've got these weird like bellows under their jaw. At any rate, I wanted to get that whole form in there right away because I knew that that is what would really just nail this as immediate. You'd look at it and you'd say, hey, that's a Moray eel. And that's what we did. Now, lest you think that this is how fast it went, I'm going to do some real time here so you can see I'm very carefully and thoughtfully just adding little strips of clay to get that silhouette in form exactly where I want it to be. Once I got the head shape figured out, I went and played a little bit more with the tail placement. I kind of cut away my original sculpture so I could wiggle it around, and I wanted to get a nice organic flow to the tail, which meant just a little bit of more nudging, noodling, and pushing around before I added a little more clay and refined these shapes even further. After that, it was time to fill in the gaps that it was left by me, moving the tail around, and I'm just refining curves. That's all we're going to be doing because it's an eel, and what is an eel made out of? Well, it's made out of curves. I also had to start thinking about this fin, this long fin that runs along the top of an eel, and I was looking really closely at a lot of my reference photos and realized that the fin is actually quite beefy. It's almost like a muscly fin, if that makes sense. There's a lot more body and meat in the fin of this. It's not like a translucent fish fin. It's much more muscly. And once I got that kind of filled out a little bit, then I went to my rake tool and started evening out all of my surfaces and getting things much more unified. People often ask, how do you smooth out sculptures? And it's just a matter of moving from bigger tools to smaller tools. So you see, I used a very rough rake, and now I'm using a finer serrated edge. And I'll just keep stepping down from rough edges to finer edges to finer edges. It's like going through different grits of sandpaper, if you will, on a sculpture. And that's how you get it smooth. It just takes a lot of time and a lot of noodling. Now, if you recall, this is to be a cute eel, a little eel, a baby eel, a mini moray. And so I went back and really kind of played around with that face. I want to make sure it's a cute face and not a scary face. I think that adult moray eels, not to judge an eel by its cover, they do look kind of spooky when they're sitting in the water. So I really wanted to kind of push this face a little bit more to make sure that you realize that this was a very friendly eel. All right, I'm going to call it for today. Here we are. I am so happy with these forms. I still have a long ways to go. Lots of detailing, lots of manini things, if I can use a word from home. Lots of stuff, and it's going to take some time, but I just think that I'll be able to crack this and finish this on Sunday. One more solid 8-hour days of sculpting, and I think we'll get it done. I'm going to take a break from it tomorrow. That'll be kind of nice. I'm going to get away from it, which will be really good. I'll spend a day away from it, but believe me, I will be thinking of it non-stop in my head. Yes, I do sculpt in my head. Even when I'm not looking at this thing, I will always think about forms and shapes and think, oh, maybe I should try doing that differently, or maybe I should try doing that. It definitely helps. I can't help it. I just, once I start a project, my brain thinks about that project non-stop until the project is done. And even then, I keep thinking about it. It's just the way I work. But anyway, lots of really cool forms. It's going to be a really neat mug. And I think the size is just right. I am glad I did a resculpt on it. It ended up being a little bigger than I expected. I wonder if Denise thinks it's still too small. I think it's just right. Yeah, anyway, all right. I'll be back on Sunday, and we'll finish this thing up. Good morning, it is Sunday, and today is the day we are going to finish this mug. Last December, I went to the Newport Aquarium and took 1 million photos of moray eels specifically for this day, because there's lots of bits of eels that you just don't look at until you have to sculpt one. Eels have a lot of weird curves, shapes. Is it a fin? Is it part of their body? I don't know, but that is why we have reference photos. In addition, I laid out all of my tools ready to go, and I cleaned off the tabletop because today is the day. We have got to get this done. So people often ask me, how do you know when a sculpture is done? And quite frankly, the answer is I just run out of time. I think that I would noodle and push and pull on a sculpture to the end of the earth if I didn't have a time constraint, just because I'm always thinking, well, maybe I should try this, or maybe that would be better, or maybe I should make the eye bigger, or I should make the eye smaller. So time, especially deadlines, are critical for me to get work done. Now, my old boss, mentor, good friend, and like LA father figure, Howard Berger of Can-Be Effects, he had a saying, and I've mentioned it before on Tiki Technical Tuesday, and it is done is best. And that is something that I have to embrace on projects like this. This is a business. I have to do other things in the studio, and I can only allocate so much time. So what are we working on? Well, we've got a lot to tighten up. I'm going to be really looking closely at all of the shapes on this animal, and it's weird. I don't think you ever really understand an animal fully until you have to sculpt that animal. Like, you can look at moray eels all you want. You can think you can even draw a moray eel. So I guess there's many levels. Like, I think that you can look at a thing, but then when you have to draw that thing, you've got to really look at the thing. But then when you have to sculpt that thing, you've got to really look at that thing and notice things that you may have never noticed before. And that's definitely the case on this eel. And I've got to make a lot of decisions. I've got to make textural decisions. I've got to think about how I want to glaze this. I want to think about how this shape is going to catch the glaze. There's a lot to think about. And it's going to just start with getting the final form locked in, and then we're going to move from larger tools to smaller tools to smooth out this entire surface. That means we're going to move from our biggest rake all the way down to our smallest rake. And it's going to probably take me all day at least. All right, so we are tightening things up. I'm about to go live, but before we do, I've been looking at this eyeball and I think it might be too big. Now, instead of just going and re-sculpting it, I did a little clay sketch first that I can just put on top of it and see if I like those proportions better. And guess what? I do like these proportions better, and I brought Denise in here and she agrees. So I'm going to redo the eye a little bit smaller. This is just a bit too big. Yeah. All right, out with the old eye, in with the new. I'm going to smooth things out, and then I'm using this little copper pipe fitting to set up some nice round circle shapes, and then I kind of pull that back with a tool and smooth things out. And I also want to add a little bit of dome to that eye, so I'm going to go back in and fill in some extra clay before I go in with some extremely fine detail work to get the pupil, or is it the iris? I guess it's the iris that we're going to be doing. Yeah, we're going to get the iris in there, and then you know what? We are getting really close to done on this sculpture. It's exciting to get to this stage, and it's also a little scary because that means it's time to take out the torch. Like I have said a million times in this video, monster clay is wax-based, and that means it is affected by heat, and that means it also melts like a candle. So if you're feeling extremely brave and you want to smooth out your surface, you can very carefully do some passes with a blowtorch or a heat gun onto that clay, and it will melt the very upper surface of the clay. Now, I am doing this carefully, and I'm really keeping an eye on it because it is very easy to just melt your sculpture, or to in fact burn the monster clay. It can get too hot and it actually burns. So if you're going to do this at home, please practice before you step into it, but it is a very effective way to kind of smooth things out and erase tool marks. Holy moly, it is done. The studio is a mess, I am a mess, but the mug sculpture is finished and I am delighted with it. We have come a long way from our tiny little maquette, our quick sketch in that super soft clay, to, well, the mug that ended up being just a little bit too big for its britches, the eel that was too large. Yes, that was a day and a half spent sculpting, but that's okay because sometimes you just have to stop when you know it's time to stop, and I'm so glad we did because the final eel is the absolute perfect size. I think it is super cute and I cannot wait to get a mold on it. Now, before I do that, I've got to clean all of this up. The studio is a complete mess right now. As you can see, when I sculpt, all the sculpting stuff comes out and it covers every surface that there is. So we're going to clean all this up. We're going to switch over to mold making mode, and I will, of course, hopefully film the mold making process of this mug for a future episode of Tiki Technical Tuesday. I want to thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed watching this sculpture take shape, I will put some links to some other sculpting videos here for you to watch, and I will see you on the next episode of Tiki Technical Tuesday. Subscribe if you haven't. I appreciate it. Thanks.